Hi everybody, and happy Good Friday to you. Welcome back to my kitchen. I am in Amici's, of course, and we're coming into our third class now. And I'm hoping you guys are enjoying it as much as I am. With all the quarantining and everybody staying inside right now, it's given me something to look forward to. Although I have enjoyed also doing the takeout and carry-out delivery for the restaurant, so that's keeping us busy. But this is my guilty pleasure, cooking and baking like this, so I just enjoy sharing my love with you guys. So in first week we did Alfredo with a few ingredients that you can get right out of your refrigerator. The second week we did bolognese, which is also ingredients that you can get right from your home. And so I wanted to switch it up today, and I wanted to bake something. And these are also ingredients that you can have right in your pantry. So we're going to be making biscotti. I got really good response for this. A lot of people love biscotti. It's basically the Italian chocolate chip. My kids have been eating these since they were very little. But you can add a lot of different things to them just besides chocolate chips. So I'm going to walk you through the steps of baking. When I first started going into culinary, baking was my favorite phase because I would bring home the stuff that I made that night, and the kids would look forward to it in the morning when they got up for school. So they had a lot of different baked goods that they got to experience while they were growing up. So this biscotti recipe is actually from a dear friend of mine, Nancy, in New York. She gave them to me one day as a gift, and I fell in love with them. So I'm going to replicate this today, and we're going to walk you through this, and I think you're going to love these as much as we do. So first thing we always go off of is a recipe, and I shared this on Facebook this week so you guys knew exactly the ingredients and the things that you would be needing to work with me in this recipe. So when you bake, you always want to have everything out like I always do, because I don't want to stop what I'm doing and have to go look for something. So I have all of my ingredients all right here for you guys. There isn't anything I need that's not already here. I even have my stand mixer, so I have that ready to go, and I have a lot of nice working space. So first we're going to start with dry ingredients. We always put the dry ingredients separate in a bowl. And the recipe calls for it. So this is flour. This is all-purpose flour. And if you wanted to make your recipe gluten-free, of course, you could use gluten-free flour. You could also use almond flour, all the different ones that they have out there. So I'm going to do 2 cups of flour. Now with baking, it's a lot different than if you were to cook. You can just scoop it and put it in a saute pan. But with baking, you have to have measurements absolutely correct. And that's why a lot of people don't like baking. They don't like to have to do the exact measurements, because if you do something wrong, your recipe will not turn out right. It could be just a tiny bit more flour than you need, and your recipe will not come out right. So that's our 2 cups of flour, and I used my dry measuring cup for that. And with that, we're going to add baking powder. So a good way to remember why you would use baking powder is powder puffs. And that's what one of the little tidbits I learned in my culinary class. I would say, what do you need baking powder and baking soda for? Well, the baking soda is a leavening agent. It keeps it nice and level and dense, but the powder puffs. So that's a good way to remember. So for baking powder, we're going to use 1.5 teaspoons of this. And they give you this little ledge on here so that when you take it out, you can put it right up against there and make sure that your spoon is nice and level. So that's 1, and then I need 1/2. So I'm going to do the same thing with this one right up against it. So that's 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. Next, the recipe calls for a little salt. And people would say, why do you want to put salt in with something sweet? You always have to have salt in your recipes. It balances out that sweetness, because we're going to be adding sugar and chocolate chips and other goodies to it. So we need just 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So that's probably the tiniest one on your measuring spoons. So this is some coarse salt. It's the same stuff we use in the restaurant, what we cook with. So that's our dry ingredients. You might say, well, what about the sugar? Sugar is a dry ingredient, and yes, it is, but you can't put sugar in here and expect it to break down. So the sugar always has to go with a liquid or something that it can be mixed with that can break it down, because you don't want that grittiness in your batter. So we're gonna set the dry ingredients aside here, and now we're gonna go to the wet ones. Okay, so I have set up here a stand mixer. This stand mixer I got when I was in my very first culinary school. I used to have an old one, and it would just break down on me. It was no good. So I've had this one here for about 25 years, and it still works really well. We keep it here at the restaurant, but my husband just bought me a brand new one last year for my home, so I'm always using that there. So on here, I started with a paddle part of the mixer. It comes with a whisk also, but I don't want it to break up too much, so we're gonna use the paddle. I have my bowl all locked in place here, and we're gonna start with 3/4 cups of sugar. So that we know the 1 cup is too much, so we'll do the 3/4. So 1/2 and 1/4 equals 3/4 of a cup. So we're going to do, and if you can't have sugar, you could use stevia here, or you could use a different kind of sweetener. If you're diabetic or you want to make these for somebody who can't have sugar, you can go right ahead and put an artificial sweetener in there, but stevia is actually the best. So that is for the sugar. That's all finished. So to our sugar now, we're going to cream it, because remember, we need to break this down. So we have a stick of butter. 1 stick of butter equals 1/2 of a cup. Remember, in the first week I showed you all the different measurements on here. But you can actually cheat on a stick of butter, and it'll say at the end, 1/2 of a cup, if you can't remember all those measurements. And this one is already room temperature, and you should always start with room temperature butter when you're cooking, and unsalted, because you want to control the salt level in your recipe. In your cookies, you don't want them to be too salty. So we're just gonna push that in there. See how easy this is to come off? And it'll whisk up and break down very fast, where we won't have to worry about it being clumped up and trying to make a smooth cookie. All right, so we're gonna put this down, turn this on low. Everybody knows that all of a sudden, if you put it on fast, you're gonna be wearing your ingredients. So we're going to, this is what we call creaming. We're creaming the butter and the sugar together, and we basically want this to get light and fluffy. So I'm gonna turn it up higher. Doesn't take too long. If you don't have a stand mixer, you can also use a handheld mixer. A lot of people have those, and they work just as well. Might be a little bit more difficult to hold the bowl and everything, but then I want to make sure I got my sides all incorporated. So I'm going to push them down with the spatula, and I'm going to turn it on for a couple minutes more just to be sure everything is mixed. I can smell it already. The butter and the sugar have such a sweet, flowery smell. It's actually really good. Alrighty. So that's all nice and creamed. You see how the sugar is all melted into the butter now. It's almost like it's one. And to this, I'm gonna add my eggs. So I have 2 eggs. If you wanted to at this point, if you wanted to change the flavor, you could put in vanilla extract if you wanted. You could put in almond. You could put in lemon if you wanted to make lemon cookies. You could even put in chocolate at this point if you wanted to. So this is the stage now where you would put the flavoring in. But we're just gonna have plain biscottis today, and we're going to be adding our flavoring through chocolate chips and some nuts and stuff. So I have 2 eggs here. They're also at room temperature. I took them out a little while ago, and it would be easy for me to just hit this on the side and put my egg in, but I might get a shell in there, and nobody wants to eat a cookie with a shell. So I'm actually gonna break it over this bowl, make sure I don't have any shells in it, and then I'm gonna pour it in. And then I'm going to mix. We're going to do 1 egg at a time. So if you are following along with me, this is the stage you should be at. And this is really simple so far. These are all ingredients that you should already have at your house and in your pantry. I know eggs seem to be a hot commodity right now, but I think we can spare 2 eggs for some delicious biscotti. Now, biscotti are from Italy. They're actually from the Tuscany region. Another name for them is cantucci. And they're basically like a biscuit that they eat with a cup of hot coffee or a wine called Vinsanto. These are good for breakfast, they're good for lunch, and they're good for after dinner. So you see my mixture now. It's nice and loose. It's all smooth. My eggs are all incorporated in here. So this is what everything should look like. And again, I like to get everything off the sides because we don't want to leave anything behind. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my dry mix into my wet. So I'm going to do it really slow, and because remember we mixed all the baking powder and the salt in this already, so it's all ready to go. So I'm going to take about half of the mixture and I'm going to put it in here. And be careful when you turn it on low first because you'll be wearing this. And it's mixing everything around. I should have told you before we started, you should have had your oven on to 350 because that's the temperature that we are going to cook the biscotti at. And they're going to cook for roughly 15 minutes. So we're putting the rest of the flour mix in there. And we're mixing this up. Alrighty. Perfect. So this is all mixed up. See how nice and thick it is? It's sticking on here so you know it's ready. You don't want it too watery, then that means you didn't measure your dry ingredients right. If it's too clumpy, that means your butter is cold. So it should look like this consistency at this point. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to take my spatula and take all this off. Now when my kids were little, that was their favorite. They always wanted to lick the beaters.
No, it still is.
It still is. She says it's still her favorite. I know she's probably mad at me now because I'm taking all this off of there. But they always wanted to lick the beater, the spoon, and the bowl. I think I did that as a kid myself. So, okay. So we have all of our mix in here. So this is the point now where we're going to fold in either our chocolate chips. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take half of the mix and I'm going to put it in this bowl here. Because I want to make 2 kinds of cookies. I want to make chocolate chip, but I also want to make the cranberry and the pistachio. So my chocolate chips here, I'm just using the bag kind. I actually have the mini. It doesn't matter if you have the large ones, or it doesn't matter if it's milk chocolate. You could use peanut butter chips, white chocolate chips. That's what a recipe is, making it your own. So if you wanted to use a different chip, you could. I happen to have the minis here because this is what we use for our cannoli at the restaurant. So I'm going to eyeball it because it's up to you how much you love. If you love them really chocolatey, then you put a lot in. Maybe just a little bit more. And I'm going to mix these up right now. So, I mean, if you have a spoon handy or whatever, you could use that. So I'm going to fold in all of my chocolate chips in one bowl. Okay, so you see I have those all mixed together. And in the other bowl here, I'm going to put I have some sliced almonds. You could use pistachios, you could use walnuts, you could use pecans. But I like the almond flavor because it gives it a little bit of texture, a little bit of crunch. So there's the almond slice I'm putting them in. And I like the slice because they bake very fast. If you were to have the hard ones, they take a little bit longer and they might be a little more crunchy in the cookie. And I also have dried cranberries here. This is a really nice combination. If you wanted to add a little orange zest in here right now, you could. So I'm going to put those in here. All right. And then we're going to mix those around. I am such a raw dough eater that I'm looking at this and I'm just thinking how good it looks. Okay, so we have our cranberry almond and we have our chocolate chip. Now, whatever combination you guys wanted to use, you could put it all together if you wanted to, because you can make it your own. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how to put them on a pan. This is baking pan, and we're going to put both biscotti on one pan. So I actually put parchment paper down on mine. If you don't have parchment paper, you can just spray it with the spray that they have in the can now. Something like this, you know, the all-purpose sprays. You can spray that down. You have to put something down because you don't want them to stick. Okay, so I'm going to start with this one. And actually, I'm going to start with my chocolate chip. And I'm going to put it down like a log. Okay, so we're going to go down like this. Just keep going down like one. We're going to go down one big log like that. And these are such a good cookie. They're simple. They don't need any icing. They don't need any powdered sugar. They don't need to have anything drizzled on them. But for the holidays sometimes, I like to get a little fancy. And when they're done, you could dip them in melted chocolate. When they're finished, you just take them and you dip them in melted chocolate, and then the ends are done. So now I'm just going to kind of straighten this out a little bit. We want it to be like a log, remember. It's going to bake. Remember, your hands are also your tools here. So you can help this out a little bit. And there we go. So make sure it's even. You don't want to have a big high clump here and then a real thin one here, because these will get burned and these will be raw. In baking, you always have to have the consistency. That's what you want. Okay, so this is good. There's one log. Okay, now I'm going to do this one. And we're going to just do the same exact thing. We're going to put them down like this. And look how easy these were. You don't need a cookie cutter. You don't even need the little ice cream scooper that you would use to put the cookies on the sheet. Because again, you know, you would want them to be consistent. I want to make sure I get all of this out of here. There we go. So I have 2 even logs here. Alrighty. And I'm going to flatten this one out. Don't rush. Take your time, because, like I said, this is the most important part here, because you want them to be even. You don't want to take your biscotti out of the oven and one side be raw and the other one be burned. So I'm making sure they're even. Because when they bake, they're not going to look like this. You're going to say, well, this isn't a very pretty cookie. Well, it's going to be. Okay. So I have finished putting mine on the tray. They should look like this. This should be the consistency. They're very thick at this point. They're not going to go anywhere. So these are getting ready to go into the oven at 350, and they're going to go in for 15 minutes. And we're going to check them, because some ovens are not calibrated, or they may be a little bit hotter. So make sure that when you touch the cookie, even try 20 minutes, always check the rim on the bottom and see if it's dark brown, or always press in the center. And if it's not like a cake, it will not spring, but just press it. And if it's firm, your cookie's done. So I actually had some baking already here because I want to show you the finished product. I'm actually going to put these in the oven and I'm going to take some out. Remember, when you're cooking, you always have to remember that everything is very, very hot. So we have to have, wherever we go, we have to have, oops, let me get these out. Okay.
Aunt Jill's watching. She says hi.
Oh, hi, my sister. Okay, so this is the biscotti when it comes out. This is that log, and this is how it cooks on the paper, so it's nice. It comes apart really easy right off of here, as you see. And now, why it's called a biscotti is it's twice baked. And what you want to do when you twice bake it is you want to let it cool for a few minutes. So while these are going to go into the oven and cook, I'm going to cut this one and we're going to put it back in. So you have to use a serrated edge knife. This is the one with the little teeth on the ends. If you used a regular knife, a chef knife, I like to make them have a little point on the end so that it's easier to put in your mouth and chew it. So we're going to cut him right on the crack. And these are a cookie that are very authentic. So they look very rustic. They don't have to be perfect. You might say, well, mine aren't, that uniform, or I might have a longer one, but you know what? It doesn't matter. These are your cookies. You made them. So as we cut all these, all right, look how many cookies is made already in just one log. I did have another log here, but my son actually took some. All right, so now it's time to put them back in again. We're going to turn them sideways like this because we don't want the tops and the bottoms to cook. We want the sides to cook now. So just all you have to do, separate them apart. Look at all the chocolate chips inside. He's a little crumbly, but we're going to use him anyway, or we can just eat him now. And then we put them back into the oven and we cook them. So when we put these back, we put them in just for 5 minutes. And it's just to get them a little toasted on the top. So after they've been in for 5 minutes, this was one that I made. This is the one my son stole the cookies off the bottom. We had already put this back in without cutting it, him and I did, because he wanted it a little crispy. But I'm going to show you how delicious these are. And when you cut them on the bias, see, it has like a little point on the top, so it's easy to eat that way. And like I said, it's very good to go with coffee. I usually always have my wine here with me when I talk with you guys, but today I have my coffee. So I'm going to just dip my biscotti in there. It's delicious. These are a great cookie that you can give out at Christmas time because they keep well, and you can do so many variations. If you want to do them with your kids, you can put M&Ms inside of them, or if you want to keep them healthy, you can just put nuts inside and things like that, dried fruits, apricots, cranberries. They even have dried blueberries now, so you can do anything like that you like. So this is how you make a biscotti, and I hope everybody enjoyed. We have a lot to eat here. We have to bake some now, and we have to retoast these, and then we have all of these. And Abby's going to eat one now while she's holding video camera. So I hope everybody stays safe again. Hopefully we get through this week. One more week of this. And eat well while you're home, and try some of these simple recipes.